Talk Shoes. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we continue our retrospective in honor of the late, great Sir Christopher Lee with a look at Horror Hotel, a.k.a. City of the Dead. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of the horror fans who have. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels. With me from Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, writer for Rockabilly Online and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello.
Writer is not a dirty word.
Writer is indeed not a dirty word. Special guest Jamie Barr is also in Austin. She is a musician, pinup model, educator, and the lead vocalist and upright bassist for Austin's premier all-female rock and roll band, Danger Cakes, where you can find out about their latest shows and their album, Quarter Life Crisis, at dangercakes.net. Say hello, Jamie.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome back. And from Los Angeles tonight, Adam Foshko, writer and creative consultant for Activision's Call of Duty Exo Zombies, the explosive new episodic Zombie Fest, starring John Malkovich, Bill Paxton, John Bernthal, Rose McGowan, and Bruce Campbell, as well as screenwriter for the upcoming Skylanders Superchargers, due out later this year. Say hello, Adam.
Dig that crazy beat, man.
Dig that crazy beat.
Adam, I've been meaning to ask you. Do Rose McGowan and Bruce Campbell argue over which is better, chainsaw hand or machine gun leg?
Only privately, and I can never tell.
You gotta get into the VIP section to hear that debate, I suppose. Okay. According to Wikipedia, this crazy-tastic movie, The City of the Dead, U.S. title, Horror Hotel, is a 1960 horror film directed by John Llewellyn Moxey and starring Christopher Lee and Valentine Dyall, produced in England but set in America. The British actors were required to speak with American accents, more or less, throughout the film. It is this. I don't even know where to begin, so I'm going to begin by asking for opening thoughts from other people besides myself. So let's go, keeping these fairly brief so that we can get into the deep topics, all of them. Let's go Adam, Jamie, Drew, and then if I have anything, I will add something to it. Adam, opening thoughts, this thing called Horror Hotel.
This may be one of the craziest things I've seen in a very, very long time. This is like an ant farm of a picture. I'm not even calling it a picture anymore. I'm just calling it a supernatural teleplay. And it's just so strange because this is very peculiar. I wouldn't even call it a snapshot. It's an interpretation of Americana in the late 50s or 1960s, that sort of era. And it's so strange. We're all listening to, swing and jazz music, and there's, everyone's with these crazy accents. And it's just very, very strange. It must be as unnerving as probably anybody from the UK listening to any of us, do a terrible Monty Python impersonation. But it's very, very strange. And this is a very odd Christopher Lee bologna sandwich, where he just sort of comes into these different places with this American accent. And I would never have sought this thing out, but just for its pure oddity and its strange pacing, and you'll get to all this later, but it has the thing that makes it is the end. It's a crazy end, but my mouth was open throughout most of this because I just couldn't believe this existed, and I'd never seen it before. I was just astonished.
That's great. That's really great. Jamie, and I'm shocked that was the first time you'd seen this movie. Jamie, when we made you a couple of weeks ago watch Count Dracula, a Spanish Dracula film starring Christopher Lee, you were like, why are you doing this as part of your Christopher Lee retrospective? And I'm curious if you had a similar thought watching this little curio either.
I actually really liked this movie. I really liked this movie. Yeah. I grew up in this area, so they're talking about, like, even though it's Massachusetts, it's like the Northeast, and it kind of, I don't know, even though it's silly and very dreamlike at times. I thought this was like I don't know, it seemed like a very quirky stage play, but
Yeah.
I don't know, I liked it. I thought it was pretty entertaining. I kept having a lot of questions about, I was like, are these real facts? Because I don't know that much about the occult, so I'm just like, is Candlemas a real thing? And then I was thinking about, like, why is there no snow, though, and the fog, but everything's very ethereal, and I don't know, I enjoyed it. I kind of liked it. So
That's cool. That's going to give us a lot to talk about, too. Drew, Horror Hotel, what are your opening thoughts?
Well, I have a lot of affection for this movie. It was immortalized in the famous Misfits song, which was constantly in the rotation in my beat-up Buick when I would drive around my hometown as a teenager. So, I heard that song long before I ever saw this film. But I do really like this movie, and I like how gleefully synthetic it is. Like it's nothing looks very real. Like even Christopher Lee's classroom just looks like they kind of filmed it in a closet somewhere. And then when they go to the supposedly witch-infested village of Whitewood, there's not just a little bit of fog. There's a ridiculous amount of fog for a village. Like they must have blown the bank on fog machines for this flick. And there's like more fog machines and almost no extras for a town that apparently only has 3 buildings and a cemetery. And I love that. Jamie and Adam both compared it to a stage play, and I think that is very accurate. It does kind of have this staginess to it, which I find extremely charming.
Wow. I mean, I agree. Especially when you talk about the atmosphere of this film, it's really cool because if you said, hey, Jason, hey, Adam, hey, Drew, let's write a story that takes place, in Massachusetts, in 1960, or God forbid, like back in during colonial times, we'd want to do all this research and present, what was it really like to be in Boston or around there. This is more like a British person's dream of what America must be like, and it's just like, it's an imaginary Boston, or it's an imaginary Massachusetts, and everybody in it says the words, if you drive around New England, they say New England the way that we might conjure up something by saying, Scotland, for instance, or something. There's this curious sense of gee whiz foreignness to it that's so cool.
It's funny, Jamie and I, right before we watched this a couple of days ago, we watched True Stories, which is the Talking Heads movie, which is about Texas. And they're kind of similar in this Talking Heads, the new wave band from New York makes this movie about Texas, and it's got this very kind of gee whiz quirky romanticism about Texas. This movie has that same thing about it's legitimate England's quirky idea of what New England is like. And it's almost like the Stephen King New England before Stephen King. So I don't know. It's great.
Well, and it's like the Mario Bava witch burnings before. I was thinking maybe this ripped off Black Sunday, right? Except for that. Right. Yeah, but I mean, have you noticed that, like the opening, like where they because last week I said, hey, there are these scenes in other movies where they burn a witch and the witch casts a spell and says, I curse you all, right? There's a scene like that in the beginning of this movie, but what's crazy is that it looks just like Mario Bava's Black Sunday, but in fact, it came out the same month as Black Sunday. It's completely coincidental that this movie opens with this like high contrast black and white witch burning. And by the way, to Jamie, you were asking about the history of witchcraft and stuff.
Like what is factual and what's not in this movie.
Some of it, everything that they say about different Catholic masses those usually exist, but I was not able to tell, like, whether, you know, in the searching that I did, whether there were actual, you know, I don't know, witchy rituals having to do with these particular Catholic masses. Who knows? But what I did find interesting was that, and I had heard this before, there were no witch burnings in Salem. In Salem, Massachusetts, everybody who was convicted of witchcraft during the crazy witch trials of the 15th century were all hanged, except for one guy, Giles Corey, I think he was called, who was pressed, which is to say that he was killed with large stones. But everybody else was hanged. They didn't do burnings here in the United States. I don't know why. I don't know.
You know, what I don't understand
You're
is
like,
why.
I don't know why. I don't know. It's not as bad. It's maybe we have a little bit of.
No. What I meant is I don't understand why they didn't. This is an English movie that's set in America. I don't understand why they didn't just set it in England, because it's not like they didn't have witch hunts in England.
I thought it would be awesome to have to do a thing about crazy college kids going screwing around with magic they don't understand in America. I think they just thought it would be neat. Honestly.
Or maybe they thought more Americans would go see it. If Hammer was a British company, maybe they were trying to increase sales and getting distribution in the United States. And
this, weirdly enough, this isn't quite Hammer, even though it shares some of the same people. Though you're onto something. This is an Amicus movie, or this is really the first. Yeah. This is the first Amicus picture, although it's not quite Amicus because they haven't called it Amicus yet. But it shares some of the same Hammer people, but it is an independent picture at the time.
It's kind of proto Hammer.
Well, it's funny because I was comparing it to Psycho, and it's funny that you were saying that you know. Drew and I were talking about whether or not, like, we've been a little busy. We've been on the road, so we've kind of just watched the movie and hopped on. So I feel bad that I don't know a lot of the fun facts about this movie, but I know it's a contemporary of Psycho, and it does have a very Alfred Hitchcockian feel at some points. I thought it was an actual, like I said, I thought it was a Hammer movie, but my mistake. And,
no, it's not. Don't even consider it a mistake, Jamie, because it's very, very close. It's
okay. I'm okay with it. I mean, I was wrong, but it was a guess. So, because I mean, it does have that kind of feel to it. But like I said, at the same point, I was, the fact that they, like, here's spoiler alert, kill off the protagonist, like, suddenly halfway through. I was kind of shocked by that. And it's funny, because this wasn't the first time I saw this movie, and I kind of remember that, but I feel like I don't know, I just lost that part of it, and I was shocked, and I love that cutaway scene to the birthday cake.
Yeah, that was great. That was really
I was like, oh.
that was really good. And kudos to you for bringing up the Psycho analogy. That's terrific. It just seemed like, for something like this, that's a big leap, and so is the cutting of the cake cut. That's a kind of a giant thing. It actually relies a lot of artistry, which is again surprising for, again I'll say it, a supernatural teleplay. It's a surprising amount of cinema packed into that.
Yeah, it's like, to some extent, it has the look of a teleplay. I mean, this can go ahead and be our first topic, just the atmosphere of this movie. It has this look where it's clearly a stage. Not so clearly as in like Dogville or something, but like Drew was saying, the village per se is, even the outdoors. It's a massive stage. It's a huge stage, but still, the buildings back there are clearly sets. It's a bunch of facades. There's this fake fog that rolls in about 4.5 feet high around everybody. And they're walking through it, and it's nuts. Even the cars driving on the roads are clearly on a set, and it's, in a way, it often looks like an episode of a TV show, except for that you're right. There's some real cleverness to the scripts that seems at a level of sophistication that's more than we expected.
Now there are three. We bring up the fog, and what's interesting about The Fog is, I may have seen this before when I was a kid. This strikes me as one of those movies that was on rotation on Sunday afternoons in Los Angeles, features or something like that. I might not have known what it was, especially with my sort of sitting down and watching it from beginning to end with a title and kind of knowing what it was. But I swear, as I was watching this, several other movies were brought to mind that had lots of fog. And interestingly enough, these were all similar topics.
Like what? Like what comes to mind that if you were to build like a DVD package, any of you want to throw in this, what does this movie go with? Because I agree.
Well, should I read you the other movies that this
we got
went
this
with?
as part of the DVD
Oh, you have one?
package.
Oh, yeah. Hear it.
Because they went with the Satanic Rites of Dracula, as well as Horror Express.
Oh, I love Horror Express.
Yeah.
But what's weird is that both of those, but you couldn't pick three different movies.
But
there's three classic Christopher Lee movies.
Yes. I mean, well, you bring up a good point. Like, the way that I've seen this movie traditionally has been in these cheesy packages that they sell at, like, Best Buy and wherever. And you always get the impression that Best Buy thinks that they're ripping you off. Like they're like, look at this idiot giving me $9 for this package of 13 movies nobody wants. But for me, this stuff is gold, because it's like, or I haven't seen The Bloody Vampire in years, So I guess we both get the benefit of that bargain. But yeah, I know you just listed three public domain movies, Jamie.
Yeah.
And you see them in these DVD packages over and over again. Go ahead.
Well, it still has the price tag of $4.99 on it.
Oddly enough, I think you could make a really great Christopher Lee cult box set with The Wicker Man, Horror Hotel, and The Devil Rides Out. Because it's funny enough, I feel like this is a very good companion piece for The Wicker Man in a lot of ways.
Interesting.
There's a Christopher Lee movie where he plays Count Karnstein, and it's a black and white film. And I'm trying to remember. I looked it up. Crypto the Vampire, and this is a black and white film. If I recall, it was black and white, and and it had a look like this. A lot of fog, a lot of except for that one was Italian. That's the weird thing to me. If you were to put this with like 3 or 4 movies that it looks like and has the feel of, none of them would be British. Everything would be like Margheriti and Bava and
it'd be Italian or Spanish.
Spanish, yeah, for sure. Like I think Crypto the Vampire is actually a Spanish movie. Or we watched that. What was that Carmilla film that we watched on this show?
The Vampire Lovers, but that's a Hammer.
No, Blood and Roses is what I'm thinking. Oh,
yeah.
Also was a very, very atmospheric film. This thing is so atmospheric that it feels like, and I mean this, no disrespect to any of our British listeners, but this movie is so atmospheric it does not feel British to me. It feels Italian or Spanish. And that's kind of and then it'll cut, like you say, you cut from the knife coming down in a very Mario Bava kind of scene to like a groovy party scene with a bunch of hip and happening young people wearing ties and awesome party dresses and listening to like that fluty jazz that Jamie was talking about, with all the woodwinds and the jangly guitars. Yeah, no, it's wonderful. It is a very curious.
Wow, no reaction for that.
Well, no, I laughed. Huh? Oh, is that an actual flute?
Yeah.
No?
Wow.
Jamie's playing flute. Jamie could play the flute, everybody. So you know.
Just to give you a little taste of what the movie is like.
I feel so 1960 Americana.
I know. I know.
Yeah,
for sure.
Daddy-O gets the most.
You could do the jazz flute like duel in.
You had to
Anchorman.
dig that jazz.
Yes, man, you got to watch Beat Girl now. That movie that we were talking about the other day. Thank you. You know, we should actually take a break now and just let Jamie do.
No, that's
a
okay.
jazz bridge between the first and the second part of the show, as if the show has ever been so organized as to have an obvious first and second part. We talked. So yes, we talked a little bit about the atmosphere. I think one of my favorite bits in this movie, and Adam, you said that you may have seen it before. You didn't have much. This is actually on heavy rotation for me. It's one of my favorite movies. I only watched it like about 3 weeks ago before we watched it again for some crazy reason. But I think like two favorite bits to me. First favorite bit is when she first rides into town, and as her headlights are sweeping around the village, occasionally they will catch somebody just standing off to the side staring at her, but in passing. So the headlight just sort of swipes across this person, and there's like, in fact, it's repeated over and over. There's always just random people just standing in the background in this village staring at whoever's wandering by. Sometimes, obviously, sometimes they play it up, but a lot of times it's just, you know, this sort of background thing that's meant to just kind of give you the heebie-jeebies. There's the other one that I think is really atmospheric and cool. There's a moment when Nan, our main character, has decided, you know, she's going to finish studying because she's studying all of her witchcrafty kind of stuff, and she's going to go out and join the party where people are dancing in the.
Oh my goodness, I remember this. Yeah.
This is so cool because she takes off her robe and she puts on, you know, a nice blouse and skirt and she does her hair, you know, party. You hear it going on outside, and then she opens the door, and then it's just like tick tick tick. You hear a clock, and the proprietress of the hotel is looking up from her book and looking at her, and the party's gone. It's the craziest bit.
That is a great bit. But, you know, the thing about it also is that, you know, just even before the bit sort of comes to fruition, there's this sense of she opens the door and looks out, and there are all these people who are dancing like they're at a dinner party at a dinner place, you know, a nice dinner restaurant in the 1950s that you know, where people are having dinner and there are cocktails and there's music and they're dancing in a very particular way, not in a shitty sort of in this New England, you know, town that's clearly fogged in wildly. It seems so completely out of place. Again, this must be what we do wherever we are, and at the drop of a hat, we're ready to have dinner and dancing. And
I took that as actually it was like a spell or something that was like a mirage, because did you see the way those people were dancing? It was like they were just rotating. They were just spinning round and round. And they were they looked like they were holding each other, but they were just spinning. If you just see it, it's very weird and kind of creepy. And I thought maybe it was supposed to be a spell, she saw something going on, because then suddenly they're gone and she doesn't even be like, what? There's no time,
for her sake, yes.
Well, there's a lot of examples of tried and true horror movie logic in this film. Because there's the old man that tells multiple people, "Don't go to that town."
Yeah,
it's the town that time forgot. Don't go there.
Yeah, it gives direction.
So much so that by the time the boyfriend rolls through in the end, he's like, "Oh my, there's another one." You know, he says that, and in a moment of self-awareness, all if he had just turned and winked at the camera, it would have been even more appropriate. He made me think of the character from Cabin in the Woods, where it's here's the harbinger, and then there's Nan. gets so many bad signals from this town. There's an old blind preacher who literally tells you this town belongs to Satan. You know, evil
Why
rules
did he tell her
here.
something like, get out, leave this place, something?
Yeah, get out, leave this place.
He walks dramatically backwards into the shadows while he says that.
Yeah,
He really does.
and she's like, oh. She keeps shrugging this stuff off, even though everybody in the town acts extremely weird. And then look what she picks up Spooky Hitchhiker, who also just disappears. Like,
yes.
None of it. Like, I'm sorry, but like this is the sort of thing that as horror fans we accept. There is the horror movie logic. You know, people in horror films act a certain way. If this was real life, you would have been like, by the time the preacher happened, you'd be like, hell with this, I'm out of here. You know,
that's why we're shocked when she actually dies, though, is because people in horror movies get these warnings all the time, but she actually, you know, the party doesn't happen, and she's like, where'd everybody go? And the lady goes, oh, well, you know, they went out to worship Satan, so I hope that's okay. And lo and behold, when she starts sneaking after those people, they capture and kill her. That's amazing. There's no way that I was expecting that to happen. That blows my mind.
See, I
kept waiting for her to come back. She was going to come back, and nope.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We get all new heroes. In fact, just for a moment, let's go back to the little university that she is ostensibly a student at. You know, you've got, setting aside Christopher Lee, because we should talk about Christopher Lee on his own, but I want to talk about the heroes real quick. So she is an anthropology student. And what's really crazy is that, you know, her boyfriend is a professor at the university. He's a colleague of Christopher Lee. And he's like,
no, that's not her boyfriend. That's her brother.
Oh,
her
yeah,
boyfriend's a student.
I'm sorry. Yeah, her boyfriend is just a student. But he's like a science student, like biology or something like that. Her brother is a professor and a colleague of Christopher Lee. And what's really wild is that these people who study science talk about her interest in going to study witchcraft in the most bizarre fashion, as though they've never. I know it's just a movie, but they talk as though literally they've never heard of anthropology ever in their lives. The notion that you would go somewhere and like find out about myths and legends and stuff. They have an almost like 5-year-old's level of understanding of the difference between studying witchcraft and studying people who study witchcraft. It's really crazy, and I don't understand why the movie is that. I don't know what to make of this. Whether the movie thinks that we're too stupid to know, or what. Or do you guys follow what I'm getting at here?
I think actually that part was pretty spot on, where the boyfriend of Nan is just in the class to check out Nan, you know, and hang out with her. He's obviously not actually interested. But I mean, the witchcraft part, I think maybe he thinks.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the brother's kind of being dismissive of it because I think he thinks that Christopher Lee's character, the professor, actually believes in what is being taught. I think he's from the get-go kind of, even though he's like just nonchalantly, he's just like, oh yeah, I believe in facts, I believe in science.
Right.
He's not really giving too much thought to like what, I don't think he's thinking of it as, maybe he's just, I don't know. Maybe he knows his sisters had a weird preoccupation with the occult and just,
That's possible. Maybe the movie's a little confused too. Well, and it turns out, of course, that Professor Driscoll, Christopher Lee, actually is in fact a warlock. It's just very, very odd that they're like she wants to go to and gets the history of witchcraft in New England, and they're like, what a bunch of mumbo jumbo. It's just it's really nuts. And I'm not even talking about the problem that like Salon.com brought up with The Conjuring, which is that if you are a certain kind of extremely sensitive type person, you might be deeply offended by this movie just through the notion that there really were satanic witches in Massachusetts out to like put curses on people and stuff and sacrifice and things like that. And it's a point of a certain kind of faith today to be able to point out, no, all those people were victims of mass hysteria and so forth. And this movie couldn't care less about that. They're just like, yep, it's crazy United States, New England, there's witches up there, don't go near there. And anyway, I'm sorry, I talked myself into a circle, and I apologize. Okay, Christopher Lee. Let's talk about Christopher Lee, because this is ostensibly the Christopher Lee retrospective. And I think I kind of chose this because it's such an unusual role for him. I couldn't think of any other examples of Christopher Lee doing an American accent. Could you tell he was doing an American accent?
Oh, yeah.
You could tell.
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, although, it's funny because people always think like, oh, New York and Massachusetts all have the same accent. Like people always think the go park the car real far,
right,
for Boston. And honestly, people have asked me if I was British since I've moved to Austin and moved down south.
Serious?
I know. Yes.
Wow.
And I notice it more now when I go back home, but there is a little bit of a different accent than I thought. Some of the actors pulled it off. I thought the boyfriend, I didn't realize he wasn't American, and the brother I thought was kind of a little,
the brother wavers
sounding.
The most, I think. The brother, because the boyfriend, he sounds really like a teenager or a teenager character from a beach movie. I mean, it sounds great. I completely believed him. Nan is, I think, the actress playing Nan is, I believe, a half American. I mean, I think she's been raised in the United States or something, and her accent's great. The brother, Paul, I think that was his name. No, it's a Barlow. Anyway, the brother, he slips in and out of a British accent more or less constantly, and it's kind of fun to listen to him do it. You just can't hold an American accent for more than a couple of sentences at a time, which didn't bother me because I just kind of feel like this is on something that the British created called like Planet America. I mean, this is some weird place that even I wish existed because I would go there. I mean, if you told me Whitewood was like down the road, from New Braunfels or something, and I could drive there, I would totally go there because
and then you would die.
Well, you just don't go on one of 2 nights of the year, evidently, which is when everyone shows up.
Oh, whatever.
You'd be fine except for that. And Christopher Lee is doing this accent. When he, you hear him when he does his R's, and he's really pronouncing the ends of words. You're going, okay, he's really doing it. All right, that's great. So the guys who really set me off were the 2 policemen who, they called the cops, and like, where are kids today, man? I was thinking, wow, they just got these 2 guys who are trying to do these 2 dead end kid impersonations. It was just crazy.
That's true.
And they're both wearing trench coats, and I'm like, what? Really? Okay.
As far as Christopher Lee's accent goes, he was good when he is just talking, but anytime he gets in his little, which is honestly his best parts in the movie, when he's getting in his like really fanatical burn, witch, burn. He just sounds like Christopher Lee. Let's be honest. And that's good because Christopher Lee has one of the most awesome speaking voices ever. But and honestly, I have a lot of really strange reactions to Christopher Lee in this movie. Like there's the point where he's got the Dr. Doom cape on and he's murdering the bird as a blood sacrifice. So I was like, man, isn't it a shame that they didn't make a Fantastic Four movie back in the day so Christopher Lee could be Dr. Doom?
Wow.
You know, why has this didn't occur to anybody? What a waste of a perfect actor. But
but Christopher Lee would never have allowed them to put him into an iron mask. That's the main problem. You would have wound up with a version where he maybe wore it for like one scene and the rest of the time he's
so it would be the same thing as Julian McMahon. But
yes.
Is it strange that there's so little Christopher Lee in this? It's so he's sort of like he's not. I thought he was bookended for most of this until he showed up really at the end. But it was sort of like a bologna sandwich, a Christopher Lee sandwich, or a whitewood deviled ham sandwich of Christopher Lee.
But he's the best thing in it. That's the thing.
I totally agree. He's just taking gulps of air throughout the rest of the channel swim. But it was just like, oh, Christopher Lee's back. But it was just he just would appear and disappear in this thing, and I was just sort of amazed by it. I guess I'm just so used to him being front and center.
Well, he's not really even though he's the most famous actor in it, he's not really the primary antagonist. It's the other two witches.
You're totally right. It's maybe cheating for me to have introduced this as a part of the Christopher Lee retrospective.
I don't think it's cheating, because, it's...
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Huh?
Hello?
I thought
Go
Jimmy
ahead.
had said something, but then...
Oh, no. True. That was just true.
Okay. Then I apologize.
I don't think it's cheating. I don't think it's cheating, because it's definitely, Christopher Lee definitely plays a central part, because he my opinion of what Christopher Lee is out of these witches, which every time they show a close up, they got all these actors with these great, unusual looking. Like, you would never see actors that look like this anymore, because all actors now look so made over and so, like they've been sent to fitness camp and Botox and made over. Like, people don't look like this anymore in Hollywood or wherever, like, you don't see actors really that look like this anymore. So there's all these great faces in this movie that play the witches and the warlocks. Christopher Lee is like the most normal one that they sent out in the world to direct people to Whitewood so they could murder them. Yeah.
No, that's true. They look like all these people look like characters from, I don't know, Goya, like Goya paintings or something like that. You're right. There's bulbous noses and cauliflower ears and stuff like that. And like we talked about, this is 60, right? They could have done this in color. I kept thinking about this as well, because even a cheap film could be done in color. There's plenty of wacky teenage adventure movies from 1960. I mean, The Blob, American film, probably not a cheap film, but nevertheless, The Blob came out in 58, and it was in Technicolor. There's no reason this movie had to be in black and white. And I also was trying to think, well, so would it have looked better? I mean, it's 1960, so look, House of Usher came out the same year, and think about the color in that movie. So if this movie had been in color, and all of those capes had been alternately scarlet and black, or maybe black with a scarlet inseam or whatever, or whatever the inside, would that have been better, or do you think this movie needs to be in its high contrast black and white?
I like it in black and white. Because it makes me think of a Universal horror flick, like they're on the backlot or something. So, I like it a lot as black and white. I think it could have done as color.
Yeah, and maybe it's a throwback to sort of expressionistic, sort of, not just horror, but it's expressionistic pictures at the time. And let's face it, The Fog really only works well in high contrast, black and white. I mean, on a soundstage. The other thing is, it probably shows a lot of the stock they use and everything else. I'm sure it would show a lot of imperfections if you really are, showing that entire little village. Somehow it just seems more striking in black and white. I can't as much as I think maybe it would have been, kind of cool to see everyone dressed and everything in color and all the capes and the shrouds and whatever. It would be very sort of 1970 England, Dr.
Well, I mean,
Fudge,
think of like,
you know.
yeah, you're right. Those parties, since there's so many modern scenes, they would have seemed really crazy. Because if you think of like Curse of Frankenstein, all right, that came out in what, like 57 or something like that, and you know, it was in color, but you didn't have to deal. So you would have had to deal with the problem of, would these sets look good in color?
It's
But
a great movie.
at least, yeah. But with Frankenstein, at least you didn't have to deal with the jarring, like, modern clothing. So you're right. There's a certain sameness that comes around by putting everything in black and white.
Well, and I think Jamie hit it on the head too. I think that it's like the spell with the dancing scene. You know, maybe it's all meant to be sort of dreamlike and ethereal. And the thing about it is, though I like color, maybe there's something about it that just makes it striking when it needs to be, and sort of otherworldly and sort of a dream in itself. If it's just black and white and it's filtered and it all feels, you're sort of dropping in and out between, you know, being on the college campus and sort of in our world, and then sort of going off into the fog and showing up in the other world, which has, you know, deep shadows, and if it's white, it's very white, and you wouldn't be able to get that same contrast, I think, when you start using color stock. It would seem too real. Maybe it needed to seem less real overall.
It would seem like a real set a lot more than a weird world. Or Jamie was talking about the dancers spinning around, and you know what that reminds me of the most is the Haunted Mansion. You know, the ride. and everybody spinning at the birthday party. And somehow that's so weird that it's creepy, or spooky, I should say, more than if they were even more realistic. You know, if they really looked like real people dancing, somehow that wouldn't have the same strange effect as the automaton-like spinning of those dolls. Yes. So
you're right. That's exactly what that's like. And they're also in one color. It's green, but it's a color. It's just one color. But it's totally what it reminded me of too, Jason, was the Haunted Mansion.
Forgot about that. Okay. Well, we should probably get our final thoughts and then move on to endorsements. So let's go in the same order that we did before. It was we did Adam, Jamie, Drew, and then I'll say something. Adam, God, there's so much we could talk about with this, but still, final thoughts, Horror Hotel.
Listen, I thought it was an amazing thing to watch. I could see, you know, this in some ways reminds me of just what's the I should remember the movie that's when it's on, you watch it and you go, I'm pretty sure I've seen it. There's Karloff in it, and it's a Corman picture, and it's
walking through Terror?
It's Terror. Yeah, a lot of this. You know, this is sort of on, and it could just be on, and you're going, it's there. They're talking about something. I'm not sure. We're just sort of watching it. And there's the flute, and it could just sort of play in the background, and it would be sort of all right. It's an interesting movie. You don't have to pay an enormous amount of attention to, and it seems like it's just right. Some movies you look at and you say, okay, this is terrible, and some movies are so terrible they're great. This is just one of those movies that's just sort of interesting. It's an oddity unto itself. It just, you know, it sort of doesn't defy explanation, but it's one of those things that, you know, I think it was a great thing to add to the Christopher Lee retrospective because it's just so curious. I think you called it a curio, and I would tend to agree with that. And I just want to talk about the ending from it because it was so unexpected.
Oh yeah,
all of these witches would burst into flames in the shadow of the cross. Suddenly, I felt like I was watching Santos and the vampire women. I was like, oh, El Santo and the vampire women. Like, oh my God, they were all bursting into flames, and I just found myself smiling as the boyfriend with the knife in his back is moving the cross, you know, towards everyone, and the mere shadow is causing them to burst into flames, and I was astonished by that. And that
we should have mentioned that. You're right. Witches aren't on the ball. You think they would have they own the town. You think they would have paid somebody to remove all those crosses?
You would think so.
Yeah, he's able to use that cross with apparently like Star Wars Force-like faith power to aim the cross and cause vampires to burst into flame. That's amazing.
Witches,
well,
not vampires.
they're witches who drink blood in order to live forever. That's a vampire-y kind of witch. But you're right, they are witches. They are here under.
It is interesting, though. You called them vampires, and does sort of set up Christopher Lee's career as running away from crosses.
Yes, that's true. Well, and Dracula. When did we say? We said Curse of Frankenstein was 57. So Dracula was 58. So Dracula was still a year, 2 years before this. That also was in color. Boy, what a strange. Because it's funny to think Chris Lee is essentially the same age here as he was when he played Dracula. And he's just doing a totally different role. But yes, Adam, thank you for reminding us. This movie has a really pretty amazing climax that is just has to be seen, be believed. Yeah. Okay, Jamie, final thoughts. Horror Hotel.
Like I said, I really like this movie. I think it's definitely worth a watch. I thought that there were so many different things that we can really talk about when we have. But just comparing it to other, if you're a fan of old Hitchcock movies, it kind of has that feel to it, yet not quite as good, but still really good in a different way. And it's just a different feel, and I don't know. I think that there were a lot of interesting little unique quirks that this movie has that, it left me a little creeped out at times, even though it was super duper low budget feeling. And, just there were a few times, like Adam said earlier, where I found my jaw was like just hanging open, just like, what?
Yeah.
So it was pretty, awe-inspiring. But like I said, it's definitely worth a watch, and especially if you're really into that hip jazz, flute.
Yes.
No, I won't play it again. It's okay.
That was awesome.
We should play us out with some flute, actually.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, please. Drew, final thoughts, City of the Dead?
Well, City of the Dead or Horror Hotel or whatever you want to call it. I will always be Horror Hotel in my
I can't believe I said that, actually. That was very strange. Yeah, Horror Hotel is what
as it's known in the good old U.S. of A., Horror Hotel. I like this movie. I mean, I own it, so obviously I like it. It's definitely a weird movie, so if you're wanting a more basic kind of horror flick, this is not for you. But if you're interested in odd little black and white horror films from the 60s, this is a good flick to watch, and it is definitely extremely atmospheric. And like I said, I love how gleefully synthetic everything looks.
Can I just add real quick, Drew,
Please.
that your box set has a really, really awesome hologram of Christopher Lee changing into a Dracula.
Awesome.
That is pretty awesome.
From straight face to vampire. So just wanted to compliment you on that.
That is awesome. Yeah, the best way to enjoy this movie is as part of any number of crazy compilation sets that you can usually pick up for very little amounts of cash at like Best Buy and whatever. So yeah, this is a favorite of mine because it is a perfect thing to just put up there and play over and over again. It has so much atmosphere. This is one of those movies that just makes perfect wallpaper for your life. And there are a few like this. Like this one, Castle of Blood. Adam, that's another one that's just like this, where you can kind of fall asleep while you're watching and wake up and go, whoa, they're walking through a weird castle. And it's dreamy. Jamie called it dreamy, and it is. Horror Hotel, I don't know why it didn't really catch on. Who knows? Maybe it was because it was in black and white. I have no idea. But this is a very interesting movie to watch. So I dig it. I think you can be really inspired by it. If people ask me, why don't you watch more new horror movies? And usually it's because I'm watching old horror movies like this to see if there's something interesting.
Well, it's funny. Like I have a Halloween Man storyline that's being worked on it'll come out sometime next year. Very much inspired by this and the movie we're doing next week.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Next week is the it's the one where he plays Rich.
The Devil Rides Out.
The Devil Rides Out.
And that's honestly, I am most excited about doing that out of all the movies we've done this because I love The Devil Rides Out.
I know it's based on a Wheatley novel. I believe I saw it years ago. Oh my gosh, I'm looking it up now. It was written by Richard Matheson and directed by Terrence Fisher. I mean, that sounds like a can't miss pairing. That sounds amazing.
It was actually Lee's favorite Hammer role. So because he's the good guy. He's the good guy for a change. So
we're gonna wrap up. We're gonna wrap up the Christopher Lee retrospective with a color Hammer Christopher Lee horror film. That sounds fantastic. I can't wait. Let's do some endorsements. Let us know what you are going to be recommending to your friends this weekend when they're not watching Horror Hotel on your say-so. So, Adam, anything to endorse going on?
I don't know whether you guys saw this film or not, but I watched Jim Jarmusch's Only Two Lovers Left Alive. Have you seen this?
No, I haven't.
No.
This is a vampire picture. It's a vampire movie. It is not typical. It is atypical, and because it's so atypical, it's interesting. I think it's worth seeing because of it. There's something that's very unique about it and very interesting. I feel like I have to see it a second time before I'm able to speak about it with any kind of authority.
That's usually how Jim Jarmusch's films are.
Yeah, I mean, I literally saw it last night, and I got through all of it, and I went, wow, okay, huh, oh, okay. I have to see this again because I'm just not sure. But because of it, I think I recommend that you just see it because it's so. You could probably like it or hate it, I don't know, but because it's so unusual and so interesting, certainly the setup is certainly interesting. Go look at the trailer for it; it's kind of unusual. It just was another take, and in a genre and in an area that is, extremely well traveled. Finding something that's sort of unique is kind of good. So on that basis alone, I think it's worth checking out. I can't say that I recommend it wholeheartedly. It's something that I love, but it's something that I'm sort of taking it. I'm giving it another look because it's interesting in and of itself. Only Two Lovers Left Alive.
Tell us who the stars are, which I think is really really interesting. Who are the stars of The Only Lovers Left Alive?
Tilda Swinton's in it. When she's always really interesting to see, and so is John Hurt, who's always, whenever he appears, you go, okay, that's good. And for the life of me, right now, as I'm sitting here, I don't know who the male lead is.
So you've got Loki from.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, from and I haven't seen it. I totally want to see it. But you've got Loki from the Marvel movies. You've got the Evil Queen from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and John Hurt, which is I don't know, the Elephant Man and a bunch of other stuff. But that's
kids know him as the War Doctor.
Oh yeah, of course, the War Doctor. Yes, well said. Yes. So very good. Wow. That's so totally true. And you're right. It is a defining.
Isn't it odd that we live in a time period where Doctor Who can afford John Hurt?
Yes. That's really true. That's true. Okay, more endorsements. Jamie, do you have anything for us this week?
I do. Well, I actually got to watch a little bit of stand-up comedy last night, and well, not in person, unfortunately, just on Netflix. But I really enjoyed the new Eugene Merman vegan on his way to the complaint store. He's kind of got that dry humor, but he does some funny things. And what I like about his humor is that it's just not, it's not just jokes. He literally goes out there and does some crazy antics, like putting random signs that look very professional. He actually went to and bought himself a laminating machine so that he could have professional signs made and distribute them around New York City and put them in strange places, and then talked about like the signs that he made. And it was, I have to say, he's a pretty funny guy. He was on Flight of the Conchords for a while as the landlord, and he was one of my favorite characters. So I have to say I'm happy that his stand-up performance was went so well for him. So yeah, it's pretty good.
Very cool.
So it's on Netflix, and I highly recommend it.
Is you said it's the vegan on the way to the complaint
vegan
store?
To the complain store.
All right.
He writes a lot of like complaint letters. Like he actually wrote an open forum letter to, I believe it was Portsmouth, because he got a $15 ticket for backing into a parking spot. So instead of just paying the $15, he said he was just too big of a fan of justice, and instead wrote an open complaint letter to the city of Portsmouth, and in a in a tourist magazine that runs for the month in Portsmouth. So, and it was pretty darn funny. So, like I said,
cool.
It's definitely worth checking out if you need a good laugh. There's quite a few of them in there.
That's actually one of the awesome things about Netflix. Actually, there's so many you don't think of it for this, but there's so much like stand-up comedy, on there, like every Aziz Ansari special and whatever. Yeah, awesome.
Tig Notaro, I'm also looking forward to Tig Notaro's stand-up Tig.
Oh,
so
well, she has a new documentary too. The Tig Notaro, I can't remember the name of the documentary, but I think it's called Tig actually on Netflix.
That's what I'm talking about. I know it's where she announces that she has cancer, basically during a performance, and her trying to find humor throughout the whole process, and that's the next on my to watch. So,
I definitely want to see that. Absolutely. Thank you. No, that's a good one. Drew, do you have anything to endorse for us this week?
Mine is twofold and heartfelt for all kids who are outcasts and nerds. Today is Gary Gygax's day. It is the birthday of Gary Gygax, creator of Dungeons and Dragons. And all of us who were weird kids growing up have a special place in our heart for Dungeons and Dragons because, despite what the stereotype is, Dungeons and Dragons is a thing that allows you to socialize. People have this idea that it's like, oh, well, that's what those basement-dwelling nerds play. But really, even though it's a little off the beaten path, Dungeons and Dragons is something that you get together, you do with your friends. It's a social activity. And in the 21st century, in this age where everything is done through social media and cell phone and email and text and whatever, that's kind of nice. So I want to say I am glad Gary Gygax was born. He helped me. His creation of Dungeons and Dragons helped me get through a lot of hard times in my life, and so I'm endorsing Dungeons and Dragons. Boom, mic drop.
Excellent.
The second part of that is if you want to pay tribute to Gary Gygax, again, here comes Netflix. You should go on Netflix, go to their very extensive listing for Futurama, and go straight to the hour-and-a-half long TV movie that they made, which is called Bender's Game. And it is Futurama's very, very excellent tribute movie to Dungeons and Dragons where Bender becomes obsessed with Dungeons and Dragons. I love Futurama. I love Dungeons and Dragons. These are two things that the two great tastes that in fact go great together. So my second endorsement, even though it is a movie that is now several years old, is Bender's Game, which is easily obtainable on Netflix right now.
Excellent. Wow. Well, thank you very much. Actually, I heard the other day somebody mentioned a book from the 80s that I want to get my hands on that was all about warning people, like, not to use. I think it was called Playing with Fire or something like that, and it was about the evils of D&D, which just sounds hilarious. I mean, I know there are people out there who would not find this particularly hilarious, but it's written from the perspective of, like, fundamentalist religious people, and it's all about how D&D is actually full of, like, secret
when are people like that going to learn that only makes kids want to play it that much more?
Now, mind you, this book is like, it's got to be 30 years old now, right? And so, but still, I want to get my hands on this. Okay, my endorsement is Armada, and that's going to be sort of cliched by now because I think everybody's talking about it. But Armada is on the New York Times bestseller list this week by Ernest Cline, who's the author of Ready Player One. And this is a book about a kid, picture it, he's a kid in high school who plays an X-Wing style game, basically, where you're part of a whole bunch of ships who are defending from an alien invasion. He's the best there is at what he does, and what he does isn't very nice, but it's only a video game. And then one day, of course, it turns out that he's being hustled off to be drafted into a sort of great space navy that's going to save the Earth from an actual alien invasion. And yes, this is just like The Last Starfighter, but the trick
Thank you for saying it so I didn't have to.
Yes, yeah, but the trick is he's seen The Last Starfighter, and he's like, oh my God, this is just like The Last Starfighter. But it turns out that all pop culture of the past, 50 years has been secretly heavily subsidized by the government, which has been seeding the truth about aliens into the pop culture so we would all be trained and ready for whatever would occur. It's neat. It's very clever, funny. It's got, references in, every sentence. So it has that MST3K style just sort of enjoyment of seeing if you can recognize everything, and I probably was scoring a good 85 maybe as far as pop culture references. It's really dense, and it's number 4 on the bestseller list this week, so it's doing well. So, and I don't know if everybody else gets all the references or if everybody scores about an 85. I have no idea. Good stuff. So I recommend Armada. I blasted through it. I was so into it, and I didn't even read it all in one night, but I was blasting through 50 pages a night, and just pick it up and go boom, and then I was I don't want to read any more than 50 because I want it to last a while, and cool stuff. So yeah, that's good.
That's great.
So that is it for this week. We will be back next week with more Christopher Lee. And if you are joining us from Bleeding Cool, we're happy to have you here. If you're here from Stitcher or iTunes, everybody, join us on Facebook and let us know what you think. Let us know what you want to see. We will engage and talk and chatter, and we love all that stuff. We want to hear your reviews and everything. Thank you so much, especially all you guys who hang on the Facebook page. It just means so much to us to hear from everybody. And Jamie, are you ready to play us out with some flute music?
Oh, I can. I can try.
Yes. Play us out. Give us something. Give us a jaunty tune, shall you? And we will say goodbye.
Okay.
All right. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Good night, Daddy-O.
Guys, that crazy.